Hey guys, tonight we're wandering barefoot into the misty inner courtyards of a Ming Dynasty tile glazing compound where the clay is sacred, the rules are maddening, and the roof tiles you'll help create might end up 30 feet above the Emperor's throne. Everything smells faintly of wet ash, fermented bean paste, and the panic of apprentices who dropped a tile last week and haven't been seen since. You've just arrived at dawn and already your toes are curling on the cold bricks. The kiln courtyard is quiet, eerily so. You're told not to speak loudly, not because it's early, but because the kiln gods hate noise before sunrise. You might chuckle, but you're also kind of afraid to test that. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, eyes adjusting as the sun begins to seep through the lacquered lattice windows. The first person you see is an old man hunched over a wooden form, his breath curling like incense. He doesn't look up. That's your master. He's been glazing roof tiles since before the current emperor was born, and while no one says it aloud, they all agree he looks suspiciously like the last master too. Around you, neat rows of tile molds sit like sleeping turtles, curved clay and half covered in damp cloth to stop the drying air from cracking them too soon. You try to step lightly, but the bricks beneath your feet betray you with tiny crunches of silica dust and charcoal ash. Every few seconds, a gentle ping echoes across the courtyard, water dripping from the awning onto a cracked pot. Someone forgot to move. You're assigned a spot in the corner. It's next to a wall where moss has crept up like it's eavesdropping, and a small wooden bucket of wet clay waits for you like an unimpressed pet. Your job this morning, knead. That's it. Just knead. For 6 hours. It would be boring if it weren't for the fact that the master glances over every few minutes like he's watching a pot that might explode. Occasionally, someone shuffles by with a tray of tools flattened. Reeds, soft boar hair brushes, and metal spatulas shaped like crescent moons. One of them accidentally coughs. The master stops moving. No one breathes. Coughing, you're told, is disruptive to the glaze's destiny. You knead a little more carefully after that. While your fingers sink into the doughy clay, your mind begins to wander. You think about how all this fuss is for a tile. A roof tile. And yet these aren't just any roof tiles. These are imperial. Forbidden city-level tiles. Bright yellow and glazed until they shine like egg yolks under moonlight. And if you mess up, no second chances. One flaw and the tile is shattered. One imperfection and it's back to kneading for 6 more weeks. There's a story someone tells in a whisper. An old apprentice once smuggled a cracked tile home to use as a soup plate. When inspectors found out the entire batch from that kiln was refired just in case the spirits had been insulted. Historians still argue whether that was a genuine policy or just a dramatic overreaction from a nervous quartermaster who feared losing his beard privileges. Still, the superstition sticks. No cracked tiles, no shortcuts, no humor. Well, unless you count the glazed duck sculpture someone once slipped into the pile to see if the emperor would notice. He didn't. It's still up there somewhere. If you ever visit the Hall of Supreme Harmony and squint hard enough, maybe you'll spot it tucked between the real tiles, grinning forever. As the sun climbs higher, the courtyard wakes up. You start to feel part of a ritual older than the dynasty itself. There's a rhythm to it. The soft squish of kneading, the hiss of water on drying boards, the quiet curses when someone smudges a corner. You pause and glance up at the sky that these tiles are meant to defy. It's oddly comforting, a reminder that no matter how precise or sacred your work is, it's still just clay shaped by people, hardened by fire, and eventually cracked by time. But for now, it's still soft, still yours to ruin. Now your feet are crusted in grayish powder and your hands ache from hours of squeezing and turning the same lump of damp earth. You're hoping the next task is something noble, like using a brush to apply gold flecks or carving imperial symbols with a knife so sharp it comes with a poem. Instead, someone hands you a shovel, The senior apprentice leads you to a cart hitched to a thin, disinterested donkey. Its harness is frayed, and the cart's wheels creak like they've been doing this since the Song Dynasty. You hop on, and the journey begins out of the compound, past mossy walls, through the outer lanes of the Glazing district, and toward the muddy banks of the Yongding River. It's not just any riverbank. This bend precisely here has been the only approved source of tile clay for over 100 years. Why? The official explanation is that the silt has divine viscosity. The unofficial one, bureaucracy. Some imperial inspector once wrote in calligraphy neat enough to make scholars swoon that this clay was best, and once that calligraphy got copied and archived, no one dared challenge it. Historians still argue whether the real reason was spiritual practical, or just the fact that the inspector owned a tea pavilion conveniently nearby. When you get to the riverbank, the scene is surprisingly guarded. Two officials in crisp robes sip tea under a parasol while watching workers dredge up the golden brown muck. The guards beside them look bored, but their spears are sharp and no one steals so much as a pebble. You wade into the shallows. The clay here feels colder, thicker, like it knows it's important. You shovel it slowly, mindful, not to scrape too deep. Rumor has it, if you hit a black streak in the soil, you've unearthed ancestor clay, and you'll have to light incense and apologize before using it. One apprentice did that last summer. He lit the incense upside down and had diarrhea for 3 weeks. Coincidence? You decide not to test it. As your cart fills, a worker beside you quietly points at a rusted chain half buried in the muck. Ming treasure boat, he whispers. Or maybe an execution barge. Probably neither, but you can't help staring at it anyway. Back at the compound, the clay must be soaked. You dump the fresh haul into enormous vats that look like hot tubs for ghosts. Cold water is added. Then you climb in. That's right, in. The art of clay refinement, at least in this compound, involves something lovingly referred to as the river dance, stomping the wet clay barefoot for hours until it reaches the perfect smoothness. You and 4 others slosh in circles, lifting knees, pressing down, trying not to slip. It's a little like grape stomping, only muddier, less fun. And with the faint dread that someone in the back is peeing, still you commit to it, because the masters say that only clay that's met the body can produce a tile worthy of the imperial gaze. That's probably nonsense. But when you feel the way the mixture shifts under your heels, slowly becoming velvety cohesive, you start to believe it just a little. A few tiles from each batch will be earmarked for the Emperor's own chambers. Those must be flawless, and the rest for the other 980 buildings in the Forbidden City. You do the math in your head and realize you're not making art. You're making heaven-colored bricks, by the thousands. In the corner, an older apprentice hums while sieving pebbles from the batch with a bent bamboo screen. He says this river once flowed red during the dynasty's founding battles, and that the clay still remembers. His screen catches something dark. He lifts it. It's a single tooth, probably animal, hopefully animal. He pockets it like it's good luck. You try not to think too hard about it. Later, when the clay is ready, it's wrapped in soaked cloth and stacked beneath a pine lean-to. It must sit for 3 days and 3 nights. That's not arbitrary. It's supposedly based on the breathing rhythm of the earth. But there's also a legend that one emperor had a dream of a 3-headed turtle, walking in circles for 3 nights, and declared it an omen. Tile production has followed the 3-day rule ever since. Scholars still debate whether this was a dream, a metaphor, or an elaborate excuse for construction delays during a rainy season. As dusk falls and you wash the clay from your legs in a cracked basin behind the kiln house, you notice your skin smells faintly metallic, like river iron and firewood smoke. Your hands look older somehow, creased, ghosted with yellow, where the fine silt has stained your nails. You realize this clay will become rooftops, that emperors, concubines, and eunuchs will sleep beneath it, walk beneath it, scheme and age beneath it, and no one will ever know your name. Still, there's something deeply comforting about it all. The repetition, The silence, the way the clay cools as the sun vanishes behind the pagoda trees. You dry your feet with a hemp cloth and step back into the dim compound, just as a bell chimes 3 times. Time to eat. You hope they've made turnip cakes tonight. You're back in the courtyard before sunrise again. Your shoulders ache. Your thighs hum from yesterday's river dancing escapades, and the smell of damp straw and iron clay still lingers in your sleeves. No one greets you. That's just the vibe here. Everyone's too sleepy or too serious or both. Today you've been assigned to the stomping vat again. Not to dance this time though, today you get to lift. 12 wrapped bundles of rested clay have been laid out like giant silkworm cocoons. Each weighs about as much as a disapproving ancestor. You grunt as you drag one across the bricks, unravel the cloth, and prepare it for the molds. The master appears silently holding out a battered wooden paddle and a deep frown. Time to shape tiles. But first, mud stomping. Yes, again. Not in the vat, though. This is different. You're directed to a shaded chamber where the floor is lined with a sunken pit, and the mud has been pre-spread across it like cake batter. Your job. Walk the same loop in the same slow rhythm for the next 4 hours. Heel to toe. No talking. If your pattern breaks or your foot falls out of step, someone behind a screen jingles a bell, gently, passive-aggressively. This, they say, is to align your body with the pulse of the glaze. Historians still argue whether this ritual served any actual purpose in tile production, or was just a brilliant way to keep apprentices occupied while the masters drank tea. Around hour 2, the mud beneath you feels different. Thicker, smoother, like satin mixed with honey. And that's when they bring out the tile molds. They're carved wooden cradles, slightly concave about the length of your forearm. Their undersides are lined with fine horsehair to prevent sticking. You slap the clay in with a practiced whomp, then smooth it out using a curved blade that looks vaguely surgical. The rhythm returns, slap, scrape, pat, lift. Over and over. Every so often, the master leans in and lifts your tile just slightly, inspecting the edges like they might contain divine secrets. One apprentice down the line receives a low grunt of approval. Another gets their tile crumpled right in front of them. No explanation. Perfection isn't optional. These aren't ordinary rooftops. These are the Forbidden City's bones. You ask someone where the defective tiles go. They point toward the back wall. You make a note never to go near that wall. A senior glazer takes over your work once the molds are filled. He demonstrates how to smooth the surfaces with a reed brush, using only the weight of his fingertips. He says the clay must be whispered into sleep before glazing. You're not sure if he's joking. Honestly, neither is he. But the brushing really does have a kind of trance-like beauty. The bristles glide in slow arcs, always in the same direction, until the tile surface shines with a faint, damp glow. Every stroke must be even. Every corner must catch the light at the same angle. You try it. Your tile squeaks. Too much pressure, he mutters. He takes the brush from you, dabs it against a pear-shaped pot of water, and returns to his feather-touch strokes. The glaze will remember this moment. Somehow you believe him. There's an odd legend passed around that says the emperor once walked across the courtyard during tile brushing and every apprentice's hand trembled except one. That tile legend says was later used over the Hall of Literary Brilliance. And the apprentice retired early, married a matchmaker's daughter, opened a noodle shop in Suzhou. The rest of them still brushing. You sneak glances at the other apprentices. No one blinks. No one stretches. One boy brushes with his eyes closed, lips moving like he's reciting a mantra. Another wears gloves of boiled silk, claiming they keep his hands honest. Whatever that means. Your arms grow numb. Time slips. By the end of the afternoon, you've brushed 7 tiles. The master brushes your 8th and calls it a mercy. They'll dry overnight under a thick canvas weighted with bricks. The humidity must be just right, not too dry, or the clay cracks not too wet or the shape slumps like an overcooked bun. To adjust for weather, the workers sometimes sprinkle chili powder in the corners. not for the tiles, for the ants. Apparently, ant trails ruin the drying symmetry. The ants don't care. You watch one crawl across a fresh tile anyway, dragging what appears to be a breadcrumb twice its size. A glazer sighs and gently flicks it off with a reed stalk. Tiny feet make terrible roofs. You step back, finally done, shoulders drooping like the tile mold's curve. The afternoon light slants across the courtyard in long golden beams. For a moment, everything feels balanced, like even the universe is observing proper drying temperature. Then someone knocks over a bucket and everything's chaos again. You're barely awake the next morning when someone slaps a thin rice cake into your hand and points toward the pigment shed. It's not really a shed, more like a very serious lean-to with a bamboo curtain and a strong smell of vinegar and burnt shells. Today's lesson: why you will never be allowed to glaze anything yellow. Because yellow, that's sacred, imperial only, the color of the Son of Heaven. It's not just paint, it's politics. You duck beneath the curtain and find yourself surrounded by shelves lined with strange sparkling bowls, green powder like crushed emeralds, blue as vivid as storm-glazed porcelain. But the yellow one, it's locked inside a cedar box. The key hangs from the master's waist. You don't even look at it too long, or he narrows his eyes. Someone once tried to use yellow on a temple roof in Hangzhou, just a modest little courtyard for a retired minister. The inspector who discovered it reportedly wept in public. The tiles were torn down before the ink dried on the complaint scroll. The glazers demoted to chamber pot duty for life. Historians still argue whether the punishment was due to the color violation or the fact that the temple was built during a zodiac clash year. But either way, it didn't end well. You'll be working with a safer color, imperial green, which confusingly is also restricted, but only half the time. Imperial green is acceptable for certain halls, corridors, and concubine residences. It's the color of harmony, of moderation, of not asking too many questions. The glaze-making process is borderline alchemical. First, there's the base of finely sifted ash from pear tree bark and burnt snail shells. That's combined with powdered quartz vinegar-soaked sand, and for certain shades, a hint of ox blood. You freeze at that one. Not fresh, someone says with a wink. They stir it together in a stone bowl the size of a washtub using a paddle carved with old curse words to prevent spoilage. You help with the stirring. It's heavy work. The mixture resists like wet paint clinging to memory. As it settles, a fine shimmer appears on the surface, like sunlight on still water. One apprentice leans in and whispers, "If you stare at the glaze too long, you see your future husband." You glance. You see bubbles. Probably fine. Glazing takes place under low light. Too much sun and the mixture begins to separate. Too little and you miss streaks. That's why you're working in this moody, curtain-draped lean-to with beeswax candles and a single tiny window that seems to glow with permanent afternoon. Each brushstroke is slow controlled, no overlap allowed. The tile must be fully coated in one go, or the final result will show ugly ridges, what glazers call tiger veins. You load your brush, carefully. It's made from goat hair tied with silk thread and attached to a handle that might have once been part of a bamboo flute. You stroke once, twice, then pause. The master watches. "You're brushing too nervously," he says. The tile knows when you're insecure. You don't know whether to apologize or bow. He takes the brush, dips it again, and glides it across a tile with terrifying elegance. No drips, no hesitation. Just a soft whisper of contact like painting wind across tea. He hands it back. "Do it again. But breathe this time." You do. And it's better. The glaze settles like mist on the surface. It doesn't shout, it rests. There's a superstition among tile glazers that each successful stroke traps a single sigh from the last emperor. No one knows why. But they say if you break a glazed tile, in total silence, you might hear it exhale. You're not planning to test that either. The tiles are placed on long slatted drying racks, angled slightly. so any excess glaze pools evenly along the curve. A few unlucky ones are sacrificed as test tiles, and you're allowed to watch one be shattered with a mallet to see the glaze's hardness. It breaks clean. The inside shines like jade. Later, a visiting inspector walks through the lean-to, trailing a scent of camphor and dried apricots. He doesn't speak, just glances at the tiles and makes tiny adjustments. Tilts this one, rotates that one, marks a flaw on a parchment in tiny gold ink. Then he leaves. No one breathes until he's gone. As the day ends, you walk back to your room, if it can be called that. More of a mat and a blanket behind the kiln house. You pass a wall of broken tile fragments. Some are kept as examples of what not to do. Others are just accidents. One has a glaze drip shaped eerily like a rabbit. Another looks like a monk's handprint. You sit for a moment beneath the fig tree, staring at your own fingers. They're green-stained, calloused, and tingling. You feel like you've aged 4 years and 4 days. But when the wind shifts and you catch the scent of the drying glaze, the sweet mineral perfume of glass becoming sky, you know you'll dream of rooftops tonight, and possibly ox blood. You wake to the sound of firewood snapping, not the polite crack of a hearth flame, but the deep, muscular pop of thick pine logs being devoured by a dragon kiln. Someone bangs a gong gently but with purpose. Firing day has arrived, and you're on dumpling duty. Before a single tile meets the fire, before a flame is stoked, before even the kiln's massive lid is sealed tight. Someone must feed the kiln god. You didn't miss here. There's a statue. It's tucked into a soot-smudged alcove at the far end of the compound behind a curtain made of singed red silk and chipped prayer plaques. The kiln god himself is surprisingly unimpressive. No majestic beard or golden aura. Just a squat clay figure with bulging eyes, a chipped hat, and one arm mysteriously missing. Someone claims the arm broke off during a particularly bad glaze year. You don't ask questions. You're handed a single pork dumpling perfectly. Pleated, steaming slightly, and definitely fancier than your usual breakfast. You walk it to the shrine with both hands like it's a royal scroll. You kneel, place it in the shallow offering bowl, and bow 3 times. Not 2, not 4, always 3. Historians still argue whether the kiln god predates Buddhism or is just a local spirit who hit it big. Either way, no one skips this step. A low wind stirs, the master nods, the firing begins. The dragon kiln is massive, long, and slightly inclined like the back of a sleeping serpent. It stretches over a shallow hill with dozens of small chambers branching out from the main belly. The inside is blackened, warm, and pungent with centuries of vaporized minerals. You help load the tiles. Slowly, carefully, wearing thick gloves dipped in vinegar to prevent stray grease from your hands ruining the glaze. Each tile is slid onto a cradle of fire bricks, angled just so, never touching the next. Glaze-on-glaze contact is a crime worse than sneezing during imperial poetry readings. You nearly drop one. The tile wobbles, your stomach tightens, but it lands safely. The master looks at you and mutters, "Don't blink next time." Once the kiln is full, the entrance is sealed with bricks and clay, leaving only a tiny peephole for flame observation and old men to argue in front of. Then the firing starts. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. Just a flicker of flame, then a puff of smoke, then more. It'll take 3 days and 3 nights to fully fire. That's not an exaggeration. It's a rule, a rhythm, a superstition, and a science. Inside, the temperature will climb past 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than a smithy's forge, and just shy of let's melt this metal territory. The glaze must melt, flow, vitrify, and then freeze back into glass, all without bubbling, cracking, or slumping like a soggy dumpling. During this time, people take shifts. You're assigned the middle watch, midnight to dawn. It's the worst. Everyone else sleeps in fits, but you. You're there with the old stoker named Wei, who hasn't blinked since the last dynasty. Wei pokes the fire with an iron rod as thick as your wrist. Listen, he says. You do. At first it's just wood hissing, but then something else. A subtle whine, a high-pitched resonance. The tiles are singing. Not literally, of course. But the theory is that as the glaze reaches critical melting point, it releases tension in the form of vibration. Wei says the best tiles always sing twice, once during melting and again when they cool. Some tiles scream, he adds casually. Don't trust those. The smoke curls upward in the lazy spirals and your eyes begin to water. You sip tea mixed with dried chrysanthemum to stay awake. Someone once told you the emperor drank this too to keep his vision clear. You doubt he ever had to sit beside a kiln at 3 a.m. though. At one point the kiln hiccups. A loud boom echoes from inside, everyone stops. Wei grunts, peeks into the firebox and relaxes. Just a sap pocket bursting in the wood, nothing serious. You think about what would happen if something did go wrong. If the temperature spiked too fast, the tiles could warp. If it dropped too quickly, the glaze might shatter. The entire batch could fail. There's a legend. Because of course, there is about a kiln master who once fired a batch too fast. The tiles came out perfect, but every single one cracked on the roof. The emperor was not pleased. The master vanished, or retired, or turned into a cat. Stories vary. By dawn, the kiln glows like a sleeping volcano. The heat it radiates is immense. Your eyebrows singe if you get too close. Even the bricks on the far wall sweat. The glaze is melting now, perfectly smooth, catching the firelight in quiet, bubbling waves. You press your ear to the outer chamber wall, just for a second, and you swear you hear it. A sigh, or maybe a song. Either way, you step back with goosebumps. This fire isn't just heat, it's memory, ritual, magic, and a dumpling-fed god who watches it all. You're exhausted. You slept for 2 hours, maybe 3, curled under a tarp that smelled like pickled turnips and burnt pine sap. But now you're back on your feet, blinking up at a row of finished tiles stacked like sleeping geese. That's what the old masters call them anyway. Sleeping geese. Curved just so, edges tucked like wings. If a tile lies too flat, it's a goose with no dreams. Too steep, and it's a goose ready to fly away. And you don't want that tiles that fly away are code for ones that slip off the roof and concuss officials, which happened twice. Historians still argue whether the fault was in the glazing or in the imperial builder's poor math. Either way, there's now an entire department just for roof reattachment emergencies. They have a flag. It's adorable. You help carry the tiles from the cooling racks, their surfaces now hardened into glossy, glassy perfection. Even the green ones shimmer like pond water at sunset. Some gleam golden imperial ones inspected under velvet cloths and sealed in cedar boxes before being handed off to military escorts. You're not allowed to look too closely. Just bow as they pass. But most tiles aren't perfect. Some are slightly warped. Some have faint pinholes where the glaze blistered, or shadows where it pooled too thick. A few even have weird streaks, ghostly lines that run like veins. No one knows why those happen. One theory blames air bubbles. Another suggests kiln spirits marking their favorites. A third theory, whispered when the master's out of earshot, blames apprentice breath. Apparently, if you exhale too hard while loading the tile, the glaze becomes nervous. You honestly believe that's made up? Probably. The imperfect tiles aren't discarded, not yet. First, they're sorted into categories so specific they feel like the work of someone with obsessive tendencies and a calligraphy addiction. There's slightly blurred but noble, good enough for side rooms, acceptably asymmetrical, maybe if it's cloudy out, and finally, only for roofs no one sees. You're assigned to stacking duty. That means lifting each tile, wrapping it in dried rice straw, and placing it in wooden crates lined with soft reeds and old bits of silk. You pause at one tile that catches the light strangely. Its glaze isn't cracked exactly, but it shimmers with fine silvery threads, like spider silk baked into glass. Celestial veins, someone murmurs. Bad omen, someone else says. Pretty, you say. They shrug. Into the crate it goes. Some of the crates are sealed with red wax, others with green rope. The red ones go to the inner city. The green ones to various corners of the palace, tea pavilions, libraries, ladies' gardens. A third unmarked crate is carried away by two men in plain robes who say nothing and leave no footprints. You're told not to ask. Once the crates are packed, they're loaded onto carts pulled by oxen with bells tied to their horns. The bells jingle softly, allegedly, to ward off tile spirits, or thieves, or both. But not all tiles leave. Some remain stacked in a shadowed corner of the courtyard. They're slightly too thick, or their curvature is inconsistent. You ask what happens to them. They become shadows, the master says, which is somehow less helpful than no answer. It turns out those tiles are ground down and repurposed, crushed into powder, and added to future glazes. Reborn, in a sense. The process is called ghost milling. The idea being that every new glaze carries a piece of old roofs, old palaces, old failures, which means somewhere in the Forbidden City, a flawless yellow tile might carry the remnants of 20 shattered ones beneath it. You sit for a moment on a bench made from cracked tile shards, letting that thought settle. All this work, all this fire, all this sleep deprivation, and the end goal? A tile no one will ever touch. A part of the roof, a background detail. But maybe that's the point. The goose doesn't dream for applause. It just flies. The day ends with a quiet ceremony. A senior glazer lights incense and bows toward the kiln. You do the same, even though your knees crack like dry bamboo. You're handed a small pouch of green powder glaze from your very first batch. A souvenir. You're told to keep it under your pillow. Why? Because even rooftops dream, they say. You don't ask again. That night, your sleep is deep and strange. You dream of walking barefoot on a tiled roof high above the city, the glazed tiles warm beneath your feet. They hum softly, a melody only you can hear, and one of them, a little green one slightly curved, says thank you. By now, your arms are stronger. Your eyes catch flaws without trying. You no longer flinch when the kiln groans or when the brush bristles whisper on damp clay. You're still an apprentice, but you've joined the rhythm. And so today you graduate to the brush room, not the paint shed from before. No, this is the brush room, the sacred chamber where the final glaze is applied in silence with brushes older than your grandfather's opinions. The rules are simple. Enter barefoot. Do not speak. Do not laugh. And above all, the brush must not chatter. That's what they call it when your strokes stutter when the brush skips or taps too loudly on the tile. It's considered the worst offense in this space, not because it's noisy, but because it suggests fear. Fear leads to tremors, tremors to ridges, ridges to ruin. You kneel before a row of freshly bisqued tiles fired once to harden them before glazing. Each one is pale matte and slightly warm to the touch, like moonskin. They rest on rice paper spaced evenly on a lacquered bench. Their curves are familiar, now gentle slopes made for catching heaven's tears and channeling them toward a copper dragons down below. A senior glazer hands you your brush. It's long, soft, and smells faintly of camphor and lemon peel. He dips it into a saucer of translucent glaze and gestures begin. Your first stroke is careful, almost too careful. The brush chatters. He winces. Again. You take a breath, relax your shoulders, and glide. This time, it flows. The brush hums quietly across the surface, leaving behind a thin, even sheen. You exhale only now, realizing you'd been holding your breath. You find your rhythm. Dip, glide, pause, rotate. Each tile drinks the glaze like parched earth after a storm. From the far end of the room, a retired master hums softly. Not a tune, more of a vibration. Some believe that humming stabilizes the glaze. Others say it keeps ghosts from hiding beneath the surface. A few claim he's just bored. Historians still debate whether brushroom humming was ever an official practice or just the side effect of too much chrysanthemum wine. Every so often a flaw appears. A bubble, a streak, a corner too thick. You fix what you can. Discard what you can't. There's no shame in failure, only in ignoring it. Someone drops a brush. The entire room freezes. The master calmly picks it up, hands it back without a word, and walks outside to burn a slip of joss paper in the kiln's ash pit. Bad luck must be neutralized immediately. You keep going. Brush after brush, tile after tile. The silence becomes a kind of music, a slow, gliding melody of motion and purpose. Somewhere in the rafters, a sparrow sings once, then vanishes. After 4 hours, your hands are numb and your knees feel like aged tofu. But your tiles are done. 32 of them lined up like soldiers awaiting judgment. The master inspects them one by one. No words. Just a soft tap of his finger on each surface, listening for harmony. You think he smiles? A little. The tiles are left to rest. They must sit for exactly 6 hours and 48 minutes. Not 6 hours, not 7. 6:48. Why? No one knows. Probably because one emperor's astrologer once declared that number fortunate for upward surfaces. It's now written into 5 separate construction manuals, each in calligraphy so ornate you need a whole other lifetime just to finish reading them. As your tiles dry, you help clean the brushes. Each one must be washed in vinegar, dried under silk, and placed tip down in a wooden rack shaped like a mountain. Why a mountain? So the bristles remember their purpose, someone tells you. You nod, as if that makes perfect sense. Later that night, over pickled radish and lukewarm tea, you overhear 2 seniors debating glaze ratios. One swears by a 23% shell ash blend. The other insists on adding a whisper of burned plum pits. You ask who's right. They both shrug. The roof will tell us, and that's how it is here. You train. You refine. You memorize formulas written in the margins of scrolls that no longer exist. But in the end, the roof decides. If the tiles sing, you've succeeded. If they don't, well, maybe your brush chattered. Before bed, you check on your batch. The glaze has set. The surfaces gleam faintly under lantern light like still lakes beneath a waxing moon. You whisper a quick apology to the one tile you smudged earlier, just in case it's listening. Dawn creeps in through the kiln house windows, scattering soft pink light across bundles of dried reeds and empty glaze bowls. Today is a ceremony day not for you, but for the kiln itself. The master calls it a wake-up day. Others simply call it tile reckoning. You shuffle into the courtyard, hands folded, face still puffy with sleep. In front of the dragon kiln, a small wooden altar has been assembled. Atop it, a single lit candle, a bowl of uncooked rice, a pair of pear blossoms, and one very specific dumpling. Yes, the kiln god gets another snack. This one is different mushroom and garlic chive, a seasonal favorite. Everyone bows. Someone chants a phrase in a dialect you don't recognize. The kiln exhales gently, as if acknowledging the offering. The kiln master waves a bundle of sage leaves over the brick arch, then opens the inspection port. A hush. It's too early to pull anything out, but the ritual must be done. The kiln is now spiritually awake, the tiles inside still sleeping, still slowly cooling in their brick cradle. The temperature must drop gradually over the course of an entire day and night. If it dips too fast, the glaze might crack. If it lingers too long, moisture from the air can creep in and ruin the finish. So for now, you wait. You spend the day in the archives. It's not really an archive, just a back room filled with scrolls, broken tools, and boxes of tile fragments that someone at some point decided were important enough to keep, but not important enough to label. Your job, cleaning. You dust off scrolls that crumble like dried seaweed. You find sketches of tile arrangements that look more like musical scores than blueprints. Some scrolls include full lunar calendars with firing schedules marked by tiny animal stamps, rat for low fire dragon, for peak fire goat for inspection days. You stumble across one scroll that describes the singing tiles theory in detail. According to this particular author, a self-proclaimed imperial tile poet, the glaze carries sound, not in the modern scientific sense, in the emotional one. He claims that the tiles above the emperor's bedchamber were once used to transmit lullabies from the palace musicians rehearsing below. Historians still argue whether this was poetic exaggeration or some forgotten bit of Ming-era acoustics engineering. You hope it's true. Later, you're summoned back to the kiln. The master gives the nod. Time to open. The bricks sealing the kiln's mouth are gently chipped away one by one, revealing a slow curl of warm air. Not hot anymore, just content. The first tiles are lifted out with long iron tongs placed gently on straw mats and cooled with fans woven from willow reeds. You and the other apprentices kneel and watch. They're perfect. The green tiles shine like pond glass under summer rain. One yellow tile, clearly imperial, gleams like an apricot soaked in honey. It's lifted and immediately handed off to a robed official who wraps it in red silk and disappears as if he was never there. The master exhales, mutters something that might be a blessing or a recipe, and continues. But then a pause. One tile, a roof edge piece with a scalloped lip, comes out. Strange. The glaze has split slightly down the center, forming a jagged line like a lightning bolt. Not cracked exactly, but not ideal. You all stare. The master hums. This one tells a story. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. He places it aside gently. Some say flawed tiles like that are left at temple altars, offered up to the sky gods as weather insurance. Others say they're just buried under the plum trees and forgotten. That night, as you carry trays of cooling tiles into the sorting house, you notice a stack of older mismatched ones in the far corner. Their glazes are odd. One is mottled like a tortoiseshell, another flickers silver when the lantern sways. You ask about them. Kiln ghosts, someone whispers. Test batches. Accidents. No one agrees. No one touches them. You reach out anyway. Your fingers graze a blue tile softly, reverently, and for a brief moment you swear it hums. Just once, then quiet. You step back. The sorting begins tomorrow. For now, the tiles rest. And so do you. You settle into your sleeping mat with sore hands and soot under your fingernails. The moon is high and the kiln is finally dark. But in your dreams, it still breathes, still watches, still sings. Morning brings a kind of tension that even the birds seem to respect. The courtyard is still heavy with the anticipation of inspection. Today, the tiles are judged not by fire or time, but by human hands, jade rods and glances sharper than swords. You line up behind the other apprentices, all of you clutching trays of your finest finished tiles. Each one has been wiped with silk. Each one dusted with rice starch to prevent smudges. Your heart thuds like a drum inside your ribs, though your face remains calm, at least on the outside. Then they arrive. The imperial inspectors. They glide into the compound like cold wind wrapped in silk. 2 men, 1 woman, all dressed in layered robes of muted gold and sea ink blue. Their hands are gloved, their eyes expressionless. They don't introduce themselves. They don't need to. They carry jade rods, not weapons, but tools of scrutiny. Each rod is carved with fine lines along its length. When struck gently against a tile, the rod sings or sulks. If the tone is wrong, if the sound is flat, if there's a hidden crack beneath the glaze, they will know. You kneel. Your tray is taken. 1 tile is selected. The rod is lifted. Tink, a high clear note. Then a pause. The inspector tilts the tile toward the light. Examines the glaze's depth, the curve of the lip, the whisper of green where the corner thickens slightly. He says nothing, only taps again. Tink. Then nods barely. You exhale. Barely. The next tile isn't so lucky. The rod strikes and produces a dull thud. No resonance. No echo. Dead one, inspector murmurs. That's all they say. 1 word. The tile is set aside. The apprentice who made it swallows hard and doesn't blink. The inspection continues. Quiet as moth wings. One by one, the tiles are tested. Not just for strength, but for feeling. They're judged on something almost metaphysical, their harmony with the air, their ability to reflect the heavens without arrogance. You didn't even know tiles could have attitudes until you started this apprenticeship. One inspector stops at a tile with an unusually vivid glaze, almost electric green. He frowns, turns it over, runs his gloved thumb along the underside. Then softly, too eager. That's not a compliment. It's set aside. You glance over at the reject pile. It's small, but growing. Some of the tiles seem fine to your eye, but apparently they lacked the right resonance, or humility, or maybe their edges were slightly anxious. There's a story told here about a tile that once overperformed, too shiny, too bold, too perfect. When placed on the palace roof, it reflected sunlight so fiercely it blinded a passing crane. The bird crashed into the emperor's peach garden. Historians still argue whether this actually happened or was an allegory for bureaucratic overreach. Either way, the tile was removed, buried. The glazer demoted to incense mixing, harsh but memorable. Eventually, your tiles are done. One accepted, one set aside, two still under debate. The woman inspector turns to you. She doesn't smile, but her eyes soften just for a second. You brush too cautiously, she says, but the clay likes you. Then she's gone. You stand there stunned, not sure whether you've been praised or gently roasted by someone who can probably spot a crooked glaze from 50 paces in the dark. By evening, the final selections are stacked into special carrying crates, lacquered wood lined with silk marked with symbols denoting destination. Some go to the Hall of Supreme Harmony, others to minor halls, libraries, side rooms, and courtyards, with poetic names like Pavilion of Whispered Ink. You and two others are tasked with guarding the crates overnight, not from thieves, but from rats. Yes, imperial rats exist, and apparently they love the salt baked into certain glaze mixtures, especially on the corners. So you sit cross-legged in the quiet with a lantern burning and a reed fan in hand, swatting at shadows whispering lullabies to the sleeping tiles. You think of everything you've seen, every step, every superstition, every tile that sang, cracked, vanished, or was deemed too excited. You remember one particularly beautiful tile that the inspectors passed over entirely, never looked at, never touched. The apprentice who made it cried behind the water vat. Why didn't they choose it, you asked? Too perfect, the master said. No soul. You look at your hands. Stained, calloused, trembling slightly from too much care. Maybe that's the point. Perfection doesn't rise to rooftops, but sincerity, sometimes. The next morning arrives cold and bright. Your breath fogs the air as you help secure the crates of selected tiles onto wooden carts. Each crate is marked in red ink, with its final destination, some with golden stamps, others with what looks suspiciously like old wine labels repurposed for state affairs. The journey to Beijing has begun. You thought your work ended at the kiln. It didn't. You've been assigned to the tile escort team and elite. And by elite, we mean heavily bundled and underfed group tasked with ensuring the precious glazed tiles reach the Forbidden City intact. It's an honor, allegedly. You're not sure who came up with that. The carts are pulled by oxen whose horns are tied with red cloth to ward off road demons and overzealous tax collectors. Some crates are strapped to bamboo sleds since the rivers have frozen solid this time of year. A tile sledge, you're told, glides more smoothly than any wheel on snow-packed roads. Also, fewer tiles get shattered when you hit a pothole. You set off down a road that is less road and more a politely flattened series of regrets. The oxen plod patiently. The sun rises. The frost doesn't melt. Your breath becomes part of the landscape. At noon, you stop near a roadside tea house to rest. But you don't go inside. No one wants condensation from a warm room to affect the crates. Instead, you squat nearby with a bowl of cold noodles and sip soup that tastes faintly of old seaweed and decision fatigue. An older team member tells a story. Once during the Wanli Emperor's reign, a tile shipment was lost in a river crossing. The oxen panicked. The sled capsized and several yellow-glazed tiles disappeared into the icy current. The emperor reportedly declared 3 days of mourning for the tiles. Historians still argue whether that was a symbolic gesture or just a dramatic way to guilt the Transport Bureau into better waterproofing. You make the crossing with no issues. The river is frozen, the ice thick. The tiles glide over it like sleepy seals, silent and shimmering. You walk beside the sledge, one hand on the crate feeling every bump like a personal insult. When you finally arrive at the southern checkpoint of Beijing, the officials there inspect every crate. Not for quality, they trust the inspectors back at the kiln compound. No, they're looking for substitutions. There have been incidents. A glazer once tried to swap a flawless tile for a slightly less flawless one and pocketed the difference. He was caught publicly shaved and reassigned to paint roof beams with donkey hair brushes in the middle of winter. You nod solemnly as they open your crate. Every tile gleams. Every tile is counted. Every tile stays. You're cleared. The final approach to the Forbidden City is slow. There's ceremony involved. The guards open the massive crimson gates one panel at a time. The wheels of the cart squeak across stone polished smooth by centuries of imperial boots and ceremonial dragons. Inside, the tiles are received by another silent group, roof setters. You're not invited to stay long, but you catch a glimpse. Dozens of men in padded robes and split-toe shoes scale wooden scaffolding like ants. The air smells like incense, pine tar, and old dust. One worker gently presses a tile into place, adjusting it by a whisper's width. Another sprinkles rice starch between seams. The roof gleams not like gold, but like time. Like permanence. Like the idea of empire carved into sky. One tile slips. Not far, just a tilt. A quiet gasp. But it's caught. No cracks. The worker steadies. It presses it into place, taps it twice with a jade-handled mallet, and moves on. You watch from the courtyard below, neck craned, eyes wide. One of your tiles is up there. You're sure of it. You'll never know which one. There's no signature, no stamp, just a curve, a shine, a certain way the light skips across the green surface. But it's there, high above the marble floors and silk-draped halls, above the scholars' corridors and the chamber of distant thunder. One tile rests, hand-formed, hand-glazed, hand-carried. Yours. That night, as you begin the journey back to the kiln compound, your feet ache, but your chest feels strange, full, like you've handed a part of yourself to the wind and watched it settle into place. You think of the journey. The mud, the stomping, the whispered blessings, the dumplings, the brushroom silence, the fire songs, and you wonder, does the roof remember? You hope so. You return to the compound with frostbitten toes, 2 less bowls than you left with, and the quiet satisfaction of a tile safely roofed. There's no celebration, just a nod from the master, a slightly warmer bowl of millet porridge, and a return to routine like you never left. But something's changed. You've earned the right to sit with the tile setters, not the rooftop crew in Beijing. These are the artisans who plan the layout, who whisper through blueprints drawn on oilcloth and gesture with string and sand to simulate slope and angle. Here, tile setting is a kind of chess. And you're the new pawn. The workshop is long, narrow, and smells like soot and lemongrass. The walls are covered in sketches of rooftops, some real, some imagined. Your job is simple, watch and listen. One tile setter slides a curved tile across the table, taps the rim, and frowns. Too smug, he mutters. The others nod. Another argues that a ridge cap must sit like a cat who knows it owns the garden. That's a compliment. You suppress a smile. They talk like the tiles have personalities, and after everything you've seen, you kind of agree. Today's challenge. Laying a puzzle of 134 tiles across a scale model of the Pavilion of Painted Wisdom. Each tile must match its neighbor in tone, curvature, and emotional stance. That last one is loosely defined, but apparently everyone here knows what it means except you. They work in near silence, broken only by soft sighs, taps of lacquered fingernails against tile edges, and the occasional gasp when someone finds a pair of tiles that understand each other. At one point, you're handed a test tile and told to find its partner. You panic. Then you remember the slight silver swirl on the glaze's edge. You scan the rows, spot a similar shimmer on a tile, half hidden beneath a sketch of roof dragons, and pair them. The lead setter nods. Yes, they dance well. You feel oddly proud. There's an open superstition that if you lay mismatched tiles beside each other, they'll start to separate over time like bad roommates. One setter swears he once saw a pair of ridge tiles slowly unzip from a roof over a period of 5 winters. Could have been frost, someone says. Could have been a fight, he replies. Historians still debate whether that anecdote proves anything, or if tile setters just need more sleep. There's gossip in this room, too. Tiles from certain kilns are said to talk too much, their glaze patterns too loud, their forms slightly vain. Others made during auspicious lunar cycles are said to hum in harmony during rainstorms. One tile green heart-shaped, slightly malformed is passed around like a joke. Rookie love confession, they call it. No one admits to making it. By mid-afternoon, you've learned that tile setting is about more than strength and fit. It's about balance, the unseen lines that run between curved surfaces and the shadows they cast at sunrise. One misplaced tile, even if physically perfect, can disturb the entire visual rhythm. You lay your first tile on the model roof with trembling fingers. The master places a second beside it. See that? You do. The light hits both tiles and bounces upward at the same angle. The line they form isn't straight, but it feels right. Like the curve of a leaf, or the path of a falling petal. You do another and another. Eventually, you're allowed to place a full row. It's exhausting. By dusk, your eyes sting and your fingertips are numb from tracing and adjusting, but your heart feels steadier, like you found something. That night, after washing up by lantern light, you find a single tile left outside the workshop, curved glazed in deep indigo with a hairline swirl in the center. It's been placed there on purpose. A gift, a test, a joke. You lift it. It hums. The sky turns brass at dawn, thick with low-hanging mist, heavy as a blanket soaked in tea. The courtyard glistens from last night's rain, and puddles ripple as workers file silently into position. It's inspection day again, but not for new tiles. This time it's for the roof itself. Twice a year, a team is dispatched to walk the rooftops of key palace structures, checking for cracks, shifts, misaligned seams, and worst of all, silence. A tile that's gone quiet is a worrying sign. You've been chosen to join the on-roof crew. It's both an honor and an invitation to fall dramatically to your death if you lose your footing. No pressure. You're outfitted in special hemp-soled shoes for grip and handed a jade-handled tapping rod. Each crew member has one. They say the jade absorbs rooftop spirits so they don't enter your bones. Totally comforting. The climb is steep. Bamboo scaffolding hugs the outer wall of the library annex, and you ascend it one creaking rung at a time. The roof is slick, curved like a silk fan, and unforgiving. But once you're up there, you see everything. The courtyards stretch out below like a living painting, brushstrokes of stone, tree tile, and fog. The other buildings shimmer with their own glazed scales glowing faintly in the morning light. It's not just a roof. It's the skin of an empire. You begin your inspection. Tap. Listen. Move. Tap. Each sound is different. A good tile rings crisp and clean like a plucked zither string. A compromised one gives off a thud or, worse, a whisper. You find one tile that's shifted likely from last season's hail. A barely visible crack runs across its belly. You mark it with a ribbon. It will be replaced by dusk. Then there's the story of the whispering tile. The lead inspector points to a golden tile near the apex of the Hall of Earthly Tranquility. This one, he says, used to sing in the rain. Then it stopped. You lean closer. The tile is flawless, no cracks, no warps, perfectly glazed. But it's too perfect, he whispers. Nothing sings anymore. They call it the ghost note. Some believe it absorbed too much sorrow. Others say its song was stolen by a eunuch who fell in love with a musician and whispered to the tile every night. Historians still argue whether this tale came from imperial archives or just a bored glazer who liked drama. You continue your inspection. Find a small section with moss growth. Not a huge issue, but enough to affect drainage. You make a note. Then comes the testing tile. Every roof has one intentionally set at a corner slightly thinner than the others. It's a sentinel designed to fail first if anything goes wrong. You tap it. Nothing. You tap harder. Still nothing. And then, crack. Just a hairline, but it's there. A soft murmur moves through the crew. The captain looks down at the courtyard and nods. The crack is marked. It will trigger a small review of that entire wing. You ask what happens next. Depends what the crack means, he says. Sometimes a cracked tile signals simple weathering. Other times, it's read as a sign. A few decades ago, a tile cracked above the Hall of Military might 3 days before the Minister of War was found embezzling taxes and hoarding tea cakes in his office. A coincidence? Maybe. But just in case, every cracked tile now gets logged, archived, and cross-referenced with the date, moon phase, and whatever the palace astrologer happened to be dreaming that night. You take a moment to sit on the roof ridge, careful to avoid the tile seams. From here, the city stretches endlessly, rooftops stacked like stories, tiles humming beneath the weight of time. You think back to your first day in the kiln yard, the clay under your heels, the stomping, the dumpling to the kiln god. And now, here you are perched on the very tiles that started as river mud between your toes. The afternoon ends with repairs. New tiles are brought up, cradled in silk, checked again for flaws and slotted into place. The tapping rods are blessed with a waft of incense before being packed away. One cracked tile is taken down, carefully wrapped, and given to a boy who just started training. His first tile ghost. You descend just as the sun dips behind the outer wall, casting gold over the compound. In the courtyard, the glazers are beginning to load crates for next season's shipment. You pass them nodding. A few nod back. You're not the new kid anymore. You look down at your hands, soot-streaked fingernails stained with green knuckles scraped. But there's strength there. Memory, tile dust, and stories. And a rhythm that's starting to feel like your own. You return to the workshop, late shoulders, aching knees, threatening to write formal complaints to your spine. But before you can rest, you're summoned. The master is waiting in the side hall. He doesn't speak, just gestures to a low table. On it lies a strange piece, a roof beast tile known as a chaiwen. It's a dragon-like figure that sits at the corner of imperial rooftops, mouth open, as if drinking the rain. You've seen them before, perched high on eaves, their glazed backs curved and proud, but you've never touched one. Now you're about to help repair one. The master points at a crack down its snout. Faint but dangerous. You run your fingers over the surface, it's cold, slick, and impossibly smooth. This isn't just a tile. It's a sculpture, a talisman. Who broke it? You whisper. He lifts a brow. Time. The chaiwen was taken down from the Hall of Moral Clarity after a thunderstorm. Lightning didn't hit it, but the thunder, they say, made it shiver. Historians still argue whether these beasts were placed for protection or as a challenge and invitation to heaven itself. We dare you to strike here. You'll be making the filling paste. That's your part. A delicate mixture of crushed old tiles, pine resin, powdered pearl, and something called roof milk, which turns out to be a lime water blend aged in clay pots for 27 days under alternating sunlight and poetry readings. Okay, not the poetry, but the rest is real. You grind the ingredients slowly in a stone bowl using a pestle wrapped in silk to avoid heat from friction. Every few turns, you add a drop of water. Eventually, the paste becomes smooth, like icing from a haunted bakery. The master applies it with a tiny spatula, then presses the crack gently closed. The chaiwen exhales through its mouth, or maybe you just imagined it. Either way, it's mended. But it will never return to the roof. Beasts that crack, even if repaired, are considered finished. They're stored in the compound's inner archive, protected, revered, never reglazed, never reused. Why keep them, you ask? He doesn't answer. He just places the chaiwen on a low wooden shelf beside 6 others. Some have horn chips, others missing toes. But all gleam softly under the lantern light, silent guardians too tired to roar. You bow to them. It feels right. The next morning, you're back in the glazes room, this time helping mix a new test batch. The composition includes powdered glass from an old wine goblet and ashes from a retired ceremonial fan. Apparently using burnt objects imbues the glaze with a memory tone, Someone nearby claims if you use too much fan ash, the tiles flutter off roofs during typhoon season. You decide not to test that. At noon, a messenger arrives. He carries a letter sealed in black wax, the mark of the Forbidden City. Inside, a tile sample. Cracked. Not visibly, not dramatically, but internally. The letter is simple. The Hall of Measured Grace has begun to weep. Please advise. You're part of the advisory circle now. You sit with 3 others and the master examining the tile with tweezers and padded gloves. Tapping it yields an uneven tone. Almost hesitant. That's emotional fatigue, someone says. Everyone nods. It's decided the next batch of roof tiles will be glazed at slightly lower temperatures to reduce internal stress, just in case. That night, as you help stack molds under moonlight, you hear quiet laughter from the brush room. The apprentices are telling stories, joking about tiles that talk back beasts, that fall in love, kilns, that dream of retirement. You sit nearby and listen, smiling. You remember when these stories felt strange. Now they feel like home. One apprentice sets a tile beside you. Freshly molded, still damp. Name it, she says. You pause. Think. Yuanbao, a lucky name, a silver ingot, a wish for prosperity. She nods. May it never crack. By now, you know every corner of the compound by feel. The spot where the sun first hits the courtyard bricks. The place near the west wall where frogs hide during rain. The drawer that always sticks when you try to grab extra straw twine. But today the mood shifts. A tile has broken, not in the workshop, not during loading, on the roof, and not just any roof, one of the corner pavilions of the inner court. A corner tile. A glazed imperial yellow one. Reports say it slid off silently during the night, shattered on the marble below. No one was hurt. But the implications endless. You hear whispers during morning duties. Too dry this season. Bad clay batch. Ghost vein. Even the master is unsettled. He calls a full review. All records from the last 6 firings are pulled. Glaze logs. Clay temperature notes. Humidity scribbles. Dream interpretations, yes, those too. It's all re-examined. You're tasked with inspecting leftover tiles from that batch. They look perfect. They feel perfect. You tap one, tink, a flawless note. But the break happened, and now something must be blamed. Historians still argue whether such events sparked stricter inspection protocols or if it was all just ceremonial theater for the emperor's peace of mind. You sit on the floor with a tray of tiles, gently tilting them, watching how the glaze catches the light. One tile number 13 from that batch glints wrong. A tiny bubble under the surface, almost invisible, maybe nothing. You report it anyway. The master nods. We'll pull the batch. It's the safest call. The broken tile is retrieved in fragments laid out on white silk and analyzed like a crime scene. The edges are clean, the cracks smooth. No struggle, someone jokes softly. No one laughs. Instead, they recite a poem. A tile breaks the sky, stays up. But something small has fallen. That poem is carved into the side of the inspection bell, used only when rooftop damage is confirmed. It's rung once solemn and slow. You feel it in your chest more than your ears. But the city does not collapse. No ministers are demoted. The emperor doesn't rage. In fact, he sends a curious reply. If the sky shakes, make it dance. You have no idea what it means. But suddenly everything feels lighter. The new batch of tiles replacements for the broken corner are glazed with slightly more copper, giving them a whisper of amber in the yellow. It's subtle, intentional, like a quiet nod to imperfection. You're part of the setting crew this time. Yes, you. On the actual roof, with gloves, ropes, and a stomach full of nerves. You climb slowly, shoes tied tighter than your own thoughts, carrying the tile in a padded basket strapped to your back. The roof is steep and the wind up here feels more personal than it should. The old spot, the one that failed, is already cleaned. A cavity in a sea of gold. You kneel, line up the new tile, say a silent nothing, and place it. It fits, smooth, honest, a little heavier than the others maybe. Or maybe you're just imagining that. You tap it once with your fingers. It sings. Not loudly, just enough. Back on the ground, the master nods. No tile lasts forever, he says, but we pretend they might. That night, the glazers light incense not for celebration but for continuation. The kilns are quiet. The brush is dry. The tiles asleep on straw. You lie on your mat staring at the rafters. Somewhere above your tile sits. Part of the puzzle, part of the silence, holding nothing up. But holding all the same, there's a stillness in the compound now. Not the nervous kind, not the held breath kiln firing inspector's footsteps kind. This is the stillness of completion, when nothing more needs to be glazed, checked, loaded, or mourned. You wake late. No one scolds you. In fact, someone hands you a warm rice bun without a word and points toward the rear courtyard. A quiet gathering is underway. The final tile of the season is being laid not on a palace roof, but right here. A ceremonial tile glazed in gentle green with a thread of gold running like a river through the center. It's not meant for weather or foot traffic. It will sit beneath a plum tree, a marker, a memory. The master sets it gently in the soil. Everyone bows. You do too. Someone starts sweeping the yard. Another coils ropes. The brushes are combed and laid flat to rest. Even the dumpling altar is wiped clean the kiln. God offered a final sip of rice wine before the altar cloth is folded and tucked away. The tools are stored. The clay sealed, the scrolls rolled. And as you stand there, hands idle for the first time in weeks, you realize something. There is no ending ceremony, no feast, no fanfare, just hands resting, fire cooled, glaze dried. You walk the compound one last time. Touch the edge of the mold you first worked with. Pause by the brush rack. Run a finger along the groove in the table where your tile once slipped and didn't shatter. The master finds you there. Leaving, he asks. You shrug. He doesn't stop you, just hands you a pouch. Inside, one unused brush, a chip of green glazed tile, and a scrap of rice paper with 2 characters written in faded ink, and "Wa peaceful tile." You bow. Not because it's expected, but because it's the only thing that feels right. You leave through the side gate. No one watches. The roof tiles glint in the morning sun. They do not wave. But as you cross the bridge beyond the wall, you turn. And from the highest point of the compound, near the chimney where no tile has been set in years, you think you see a glimmer. A shine. Maybe a wink. Maybe just the light. But you smile anyway. Because now, you know the weight of clay, the heat of fire, the brush's fear, the tile's song. And you carry them with you, everywhere. And now, as the fire cools and the glaze is set, let your breath slow. Let your shoulders release. Let the quiet of the compound, the hush of the kiln house, the soft rustle of straw, the gentle hum of tiles asleep in the dark wrap itself around you. The work is done for now. The brushes are dry. The roofs for tonight hold steady beneath a sky full of stars you'll never need to tile. You lie back on your mat, perhaps in the corner of that same courtyard where the plum tree leans slightly and the last ceremonial tile rests at its roots. You remember its soft green sheen, how it shimmered like river jade in the morning light. The breeze shifts. A whisper of pine ash dried glaze and the faintest scent of tea floats past your cheek. You think of the tile you placed. Maybe it's up there now, curved and gleaming, catching moonlight above the emperor's chamber. Maybe it hums in the rain. Maybe it remembers your hands. Or maybe not. Maybe it just is. And that's enough. So let the rooftops fade into dream. Let the silence of the brush room lull you. Let the kiln's long sigh cradle your thoughts. There's nothing more to hold, nothing more to shape. Only breath, only sleep, only tiles resting, just like you.